After a thoroughly enjoyable opening round for the A-League Men 2024-25 season, it is time for our round 2 predictions. We learn a lot from round 1, and that's certainly going to help us heading into the coming rounds, and especially with our predictions. We got a few games right last week, but in a couple games we did get some surprise results. Round 2, we've got some huge games coming up. Auckland FC hosting Sydney FC, a Melbourne Derby, Adelaide United playing their first game of the season as well. So let's jump into our predictions. And of course, as always, would love to get your thoughts on the games coming up this weekend. So drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments. First of all, Friday night sees Macarthur FC host Newcastle Jets. Macarthur FC were the best team from round 1 easily, obviously with the 6-1 win over Perth Glory. And I think we can expect Bulls to be really strong at home this season. Winners of the Australia Cup, starting with a big win to kick off the A-League season against the Newcastle Jets side, who showed decent signs in their game against Melbourne City, where they lost in the opening round. They were pushing towards the end, but it wasn't quite clicking for them. Maybe it might just take a few weeks for Newcastle Jets to gel, especially with a handful of new players in that team. Wellington looked bright in that game last week against Melbourne City. But for Newcastle Jets, the task is going to be trying to hold back this Macarthur FC attack. I mean, last week, Jed Drew, Jake Holman, Marin Yakalic, and of course, Valeja Man up front, that sort of attacking quartet from Macarthur FC, which is so fluid going forward. And there's a chance they could really pull Newcastle Jets apart in this game. We saw the way that they punished Perth Glory's poor defending last week. So Newcastle Jets will really have to be on top of their game at the back. For a specific duel to watch in this game, keep an eye on Macarthur FC's left-hand side where Marin Yakalic has been stationed. He's been absolutely incredible through their Australia Cup run and last week as well, scoring 2 goals and grabbing an assist. The right back for Newcastle Jets, we expect, as always, to be Dane Ingham, who is a decent player. Maybe his strengths are going forward in attack, but I think there's a chance that he really is pinned back in defence and, having to basically play a man marking role and Marin Yakalic to try and keep him quiet. So a huge test for the New Zealand fullback for Newcastle Jets. For Newcastle, obviously they were missing Lockie Rose up front for their first game. Justin Vidic started, and we did see Ben Gibson come on at half-time. So some question marks in terms of how Newcastle Jets will look in the final third. As well, Clayton Taylor, he was on the bench last week, which was a surprise call from Rob Stanton. Clayton Taylor was probably Newcastle Jets' best player last season, so maybe he might come into the lineup as well for Newcastle. So maybe some reshuffling still for Rob Stanton's side. But Macarthur FC, based off their performance last week, based off the players that they have going forward, they've just got so much confidence. That 6-1 win is going to give them a huge boost early on in this A-League season. I think we have to call Macarthur FC to win this game. Very curious to see what Newcastle Jets have to offer in this matchup after losing their opening game. But Macarthur FC, I'm going to back them for a 3-1 win in this match. Next up, Saturday afternoon, Adelaide United are in action for the first time this season. Of course, we've got buys, so there is a team missing out each round. Brisbane Roar missing out for round 2, but Adelaide United, first game of the A-League season, and they are hosting the reigning champions, Central Coast Mariners. Mariners drawing 0-0 in their first game of the A-League season against Melbourne Victory. And we saw some bright signs from the Mariners in that match. New signings, Moragas, Fahal were looking dangerous on that left-hand side. Alfie McCalmont was showing his passing range in that match as well. Against an Adelaide United side who made it to the semi-finals of the Australia Cup. I've got a few new signings who could make their A-League debuts for the Reds in this game, with the likes of Ben Falami, potentially Bart Vreens if he is injury-free as well. So certainly some players to keep an eye on from an Adelaide United perspective. For the Mariners, obviously that short turnaround worth mentioning. They're going to be coming back after that midweek match away in China on Tuesday evening. So a quick turnaround for the Mariners, who travel to Adelaide for this Saturday. And I think the Reds will be looking at that and backing themselves to get a win here for their first match of the season. But Mariners, despite not getting the win, we showed some really good signs against Melbourne Victory. Again, as we're saying to many teams, it might just take a few weeks for a bunch of these new signings to get gelling, but there's still a really strong squad that Mariners have at the moment, and I'm backing us to get a result here away to Adelaide. I'm going to go 2-1 Mariners against the Reds. For a matchup to watch in this game, I think it's the 2 key midfield players. Isai is for the Reds, one of the top midfielders in the league. He has been having to sit back in defence quite a lot lately for Adelaide due to the fact they've had so many injuries at the back. But if Bart Vreens is available, we could see him shift back into midfield. And for the Mariners, Alfie McCalmont, I think he's got an immense amount of potential. He's still just 24 years of age. This is a guy who's shown really decent passing range in the few games that he has played for the Mariners. And his confidence, of course, will continue to grow game get-by game for Central Coast, but I think he's going to be really, really important for the Mariners this season. So it's going to be about which of those two midfield men will control and dominate this game in the middle of the park. Melbourne Derby. We are doing a live watch along for this game this coming Saturday. Join us in the live chat because it's set to be a very exciting matchup. Melbourne victory, Melbourne City. Worth pointing out, both teams missing players for the Derby. Both teams had players sent off in round one. Roderick Miranda, huge out for Melbourne victory. So we expect Josh Rawlins to come in central defence for victory in this game. And for Melbourne City, they're going to be without Jimmy Jego in midfield. So we might see Ugarkovic step in, maybe one of the new signings, Andreas Kuhn, coming into midfield as well. And of course, Patrick Kisnorbo, the former Melbourne City head coach and player, won trophies with Melbourne City, coming up against his former side here. It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of reception Patrick Kisnorbo gets from the Melbourne City fan base. But now Melbourne victory, and this is a tricky one to predict. Obviously, Melbourne victory drawing 0-0 in their first game of the season against Mariners. Looked really good in the first half, though, created some good chances. Looked quite fluent going forward, especially that front four. And for Melbourne City, the 1-0 win, the gritty 1-0 win against Newcastle Jets, where they had to do a lot of defending towards the end. But again, looked really, really good in that game. Jonathan Cohen, new signing, looked great, and I expect him to be dangerous in this game for Melbourne City. Macarthur already scoring this season, always a dangerous player as well. We did see Andrew Naboot play up top through the middle as striker, so we expect to see that once again for Melbourne City in this game. Question marks in terms of whether we'll see Matt Leckie return yet. We'll keep an eye on that one for sure, but that would be a big boost if they could get Leckie returning for this matchup. Two players going head-to-head to keep an eye on in this match. A key duel will be on that left-hand side for Melbourne City. Marco Tilio, obviously a talented player, coming up against Socceroos right back Jason Guerrier. Obviously, Guerrier high on confidence after coming back after a couple appearances for the Socceroos. A great past month for Jason Guerrier. And he's going to have to be really switched on to nullify Marco Tilio, who is such a tricky player. He's so dangerous on either foot. It's going to be a really fascinating duel to see who dominates that area of the pitch. Obviously, the most recent Melbourne Derby, an incredible matchup at the end of last season in that elimination final, which went to a penalty shootout victory, winning in the end. So I think we can expect more drama in this game as well. They're always hard to predict, Melbourne derbies also, regardless of where the two teams are sitting on the ladder. It doesn't seem to matter at all. Any team can win on their day. So it's a really, really tricky one to predict. For me, I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going for a 1-1 draw. This one could be a real stalemate, especially in the first half. Might explode to life towards the end of the match, but expecting a really, really tightly contested matchup for this one. As mentioned, we will be doing a live watch along for this game. So join us live on YouTube this Saturday. Melbourne Derby, huge. And then to round off the coming Saturday, it's Perth Glory hosting Wellington Phoenix. Are we still calling this the distance derby? I know Auckland to Perth is apparently a longer distance, so who knows whether this is still going to be referred to as the distance derby. But Perth Glory, Wellington Phoenix, very, very fascinating matchup because you've got a Glory side who have to bounce back after that terrible performance and result away to Macarthur FC in round one. And this is a huge, huge test now for David Zrilic. We're all very curious to see how Perth Glory bounce back after that shocking result last week. You know, so many new players in that team. Is there a real reshuffle now for the second round match for Perth Glory? They had a few players missing last week as well, Wellington Phoenix, so it'd be a big boost if they could get some of those guys returning for this week. We'll keep an eye on that one, that's for sure. But for me, I'm just really curious to see how Perth Glory go. You know, do they really rotate this team and bring in some new players? I think that defensive area is the one where we might see a bit of reshuffling. The back four for Perth Glory last week, we saw Majeka Dumni at right back, Labib and Kunga at centre back, and left back was Litolejski. They've certainly got a few players who could slot into those positions as well. Ollie Sale, again, conceding so many goals. He wasn't really at fault for any of those goals, really. It was more so the poor defending from Perth Glory. But you just wonder whether David Zrilic may be tempted to bring in a good young keeper like Cameron Cook, who has, you know, shown his quality in the past. For my key matchup to keep an eye on in this game, I'm looking at Adam Taggart for Perth Glory, who did have a couple moments in that game last week against Macarthur FC, but will be hoping to get even more involved in this game at home against Wellington. And he'll be coming up against Scott Wooden, who was playing as sort of that central centre back in a back three for Wellington last week. Such a consistent and solid performer, Scott Wooden for Wellington Phoenix. And that's going to be a really interesting battle coming up against one of the top strikers in the A-League in Adam Taggart. Look, I think we will see a response from Perth Glory. I think despite that terrible result in round one, I don't think we're going to see performances like that from them week in, week out. I think they will be a really competitive team this season, Perth Glory, especially as we get, a few more weeks into the season. But Wellington Phoenix, just a little bit more well organised at the moment. I think they have their game game plan a little bit more well established, despite having a number of new players in that lineup. So Wellington Phoenix, I think they're a chance to get the win here. I think Perth Glory, maybe it's just a little bit too early on in the season for them. Wellington, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for the Phoenix. This next one is set up as one of the most tantalizing matches coming up in round 2. Auckland FC, Sydney FC. So many talking points for this match. Obviously, so many eyes are going to be on the Melbourne Derby Saturday evening. But this match on Sunday afternoon is going to be crazy because you've got two teams who won in the opening weekend of the season. You've got Steve Corica, Auckland FC head coach, coming up against his former side at Sydney FC. So much to discuss here. Auckland FC, obviously so much excitement around the new club in the league, and it was a huge occasion seeing them sell at Go Media Stadium, 25,000 fans in there, and overall had a really good performance on the field. In attack, looked very dangerous and fluid, and defense, they were well organised. But they're coming up against a Sydney FC team who are expecting to be one of the top teams in the competition this season, with the likes of Klamala, Douglas Costa, Anis Wahim, and Joe Lolly. Such a dangerous attack up top for Sydney FC, who grabbed that Sydney Derby win in round 1 and were impressive in that game as well. Sydney FC were looking so dangerous in attack last week, and Auckland FC, that backline will have to be on their game to nullify those dangerous Sydney attackers. Douglas Costa is already settling in really well. Joe Lolly was fantastic last week as well, and Patrick Klamala has proved a threat in the box also. I think the crowd is going to play a pivotal factor in this game. Hopefully we do see another massive turnout from the Port for this game. Auckland FC, I was impressed with Vestrate in midfield. Liam Gillian was very lively on the left wing. Guillermo May was fantastic up top as well. They've got a really strong team, Auckland FC, and I wouldn't expect many changes from Steve Corica's team for this game against the Sky Blues. It's going to be a really fascinating battle though. We didn't really see Alex Paulson, Auckland FC goalkeeper, called into action all that often last week against Brisbane. He may well be a key player in this game because, as we mentioned with the likes of Klamala, Costa, Lolly, there's going to be so many chances created by Sydney FC, and Alex Paulson is going to be called into action many more times now. He may be required to make some crucial saves in this game. So for a player to watch, I am looking at Alex Paulson, who on his day is the best goalkeeper in the A-League for sure. So it's a huge opportunity for both teams to start the season with 6 points. I mean, Auckland FC, if they win this game, it is a huge statement just 2 weeks into the season. Not many people necessarily expecting Auckland to be pushing deep into the top 6. Some people calling them to sort of just sneak into finals. If they get another win here, especially against a top team in Sydney FC, Auckland FC are going to be a real team to watch early on this season. Sydney FC, another big away test for them. They were coming up against Western Sydney Wanderers at Wanderers home stadium, managed to dig deep and get the result there, and were the better team in the end, and there's a good chance they do control most of this game as well. So really excited to watch this matchup on Sunday, Arvo. It's such a tricky one to predict, so I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going to go 2-2 draw. It could easily swing either way. As we've talked about here, there's just so much sort of to talk about. There's so many strengths for both teams. Tricky one to pick, so I'm sticking with that 2-2 draw. And to finish off the weekend, we have Western United hosting Western Sydney Wanderers, the two West teams. So this matchup, the first match at home at Ironbark Fields for Western United, taking on Juan Mata and Western Sydney Wanderers. And in terms of Juan Mata, it'll be interesting to see whether he does start this game. It was great seeing him make his A-League debut last week in the Sydney Derby. He came off the bench with about half an hour to go and showed some decent signs as well. He looked very energetic for Western Sydney Wanderers. So fascinated to see whether Alan Stajic is, maybe tempted to start Juan Mata in this game. Western United, I mean, they impressed me in their first round match against Wellington Phoenix, where they grabbed a very important draw. Hopefully for Western United, they can get some more players returning to that team as well. Ben Garuccio was missing last week. That would be a big inclusion for them for this matchup. But for Western Sydney Wanderers, despite that loss in the Sydney Derby last week, and Sydney probably being the better team overall, they did have their opportunities, Western Sydney Wanderers, and those young guys put in some decent performances. Aiden Hammond scored a fantastic goal and had a few moments throughout the game. Zach Sapsford, always dangerous up top as well. Couldn't quite get himself into the game too much last week, but may have a bigger role in this matchup as well. Barella was looking dangerous also. And I think just looking at the personnel that Wanderers have, we know this team is going to be really dangerous a few weeks into the season. But in this matchup, I think the quality might prove too much for Western United in the end. I mean, of course, you've got Hiroshi Basuki up top, who is always capable of scoring goals. The likes of Grimaldi and Danzaki in wide areas, creating opportunities from those wings. But Western Sydney Wanderers, too much quality for me. Not only could Juan Mata maybe start this match, but Božidar Krajev could make an impact as well. Fantastic player on his day as well. So, Western Sydney Wanderers, I am backing them to get a win in this game. I'm going to go for a 2-1 away win for the Wanderers. There's my predictions for round 2 in the A-League men's. Make sure to join us this Saturday evening for a live watch along of the Melbourne Derby, Victory City, a crucial game so early on in this season. And also make sure to join us live on Sunday night, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. We are doing our live A-League round recap. We're doing this every Sunday evening after the A-League round wraps up. We did our first one last week. We had a fantastic turnout. So great to see so many of you joining the conversation in the live chat as we break down the round that we've just seen play out. So we're going to be doing it this coming Sunday as well. So make sure to join us 8 p.m. this Sunday, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, right here on Coastwatch Football. Thank you very much for tuning into another predictions video. Make sure to hit the like button on the way out and stay subscribed so you don't miss any content here on the channel. My name's Lockie. This is Coastwatch Football. Enjoy the weekend of A-League action, and I'll see you in the next one.